Now we're going to get into the fun part. We're going to actually start painting the weights onto the cloth and get our cloth set up to where part of it is going to be like burlap, and then the middle part that's coming down from his body over here is going to be set up as a heavy leather. So the first thing we want to do is in our character folder here, Paragon, Sevarog, Characters, Heroes, Sevarog, Meshes. We want to go to our main character over here and double click. And I'm just going to drag my tab up here. He always shows up with the different skin for some reason. I don't know why, but it changes when it's in the level. So before we get into the different settings, remember we're going to use these burlap settings here and the heavy leather over here. I'm going to include this as a PDF file in the course, so you'll be able to have that open and go step by step as we're going to do here. But the first thing we want to do is we have our clothing tab open here, and we want to make sure that section selection is highlighted up here, and position our character where we can get to it pretty easily. And the first thing we want to do, let's do the middle. Sometimes it's hard to select. You got to select it a couple times or click off of it and click on it again. So this middle piece here, I'm going to frame in on it. Let's just examine it and see. This middle piece right here, this is the one I want to be like a stiff leather. Now you could change it and make it whatever you want, but just for the purposes of this tutorial, I want to have this to be stiffer than the rest of these clothing strands over here. So with it selected, remember how we go through this process? We right click. And you see what happened? It just unselected when I did that. Right click and create clothing data from section. Now I'm going to call this one clothing body. I'm going to leave the physics asset on there, the Sevarog extension. We're going to be dealing with that later. And click create. And up here I've created my first clothing one. Now remember, when we go to paint the weights, this is the step I always forget. It's the step most people forget too, is that we have to apply what we just created. So sometimes it's better just to reselect it, right click, and apply the clothing data before we start painting. You can do it either way, but half the time I forget to apply it, and then I'm wondering why I have no cloth effect. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. It takes a moment for Unreal Engine to think, and it usually does this, and we'll start compiling the shaders again. So that's kind of your clue for what's going on here. So we'll just wait for that to compile. Almost done. Okay, there we go. Now what I want to do with my clothing body selected, I'm going to activate cloth paint. You can see my brush is like way too big. It's huge. So we're going to go down here, and I'm going to make sure that my cloth painting tool says brush. We're going to be using smooth in a little bit, but right now we're using brush. And I want my paint value, a lot of times 100 isn't enough. I'm going to bump this way up to 1,000 just to make sure that it's going to really cover the whole thing. It also has something to do with how it affects it according to 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, that kind of thing. But we're going to just leave it at 1,000 so we get a good strong paint there. The radius, I'm going to bring that down to about a 20. Leave everything else the same. So now we'll just go ahead and paint. Paint up like this. You can see that it's not painting all the way through, so I've got to rotate my view. And then be sure that you're painting all the vertices down here at the bottom, because if you leave one pink or, you know, it's not painted out, it's not going to flow. It's going to have like a little pin at the bottom and it won't move. Okay, so we see this one here. I'm going to get that. Okay, so now what I want to do to get a nice smooth transition between what I've painted out and what's still, you know, stiff that doesn't have anything applied is go over here to the brush and select smooth. Now the key here is you don't, this is what I used to do wrong, is I would go paint thinking that I was smoothing it. That's not the way to do it. You select smooth and then you put the strength on here. We'll just leave it at the 0.2 default and then click here, smooth mesh. And I usually click on it about 2 or 3 times, and if you see up close, what it's doing is it's creating a like a little blend, a gradient. See it right there? And then we'll put that back on brush. Okay, so we've got that made. Now I'm going to deactivate my paint, and holy moly, what the hell is going on here, right? All of a sudden I've got this ugly mess right here. What the hell is going on, right? So that's going to freak everybody out, and you're going to think you just did something wrong. What could possibly be causing that? Well, what it is, it's the physics asset underneath here. Now we could choose not to use it, which is not what we want to do. What we want to do is make some adjustments to it, because we want to have that in our level so that the body can bump into things, you know, not go through it. My autosave turning on there. So let's go fix that right now. Let's go over to our Sevarog extents. See, this is what it's called here. So we'll go over and it's right in our mesh folder. And let's double click on that. Now, when we look at our physics asset, we can see the problem here, right? It's this humongous capsule. It's just way too big. So go ahead and select that. And then up here, select the scale. And the first thing we want to do is scale that down. Now, see what's happening here? Can you see the cloth moving as I scale that down? So we'll go ahead and scale that down. I want to move a little closer to our character here. And because I want this cloth to actually drape on the floor, I'm also going to scale this, make the capsule shorter, and then click on translate mode and move this up. And then we'll just rotate. I'm left mouse key holding down my Alt key after hitting the F key to frame it, in case you needed a little review on that. And now we've got the capsule to a better size. We want to make sure that we click Save here. And then we'll go back to our messed up character over here in the Clothing tab. And in order to get that to actually show up, you want to click Activate Paint and then click off of it again. And now we can see that it's hanging correctly. If you want to, a good way to judge to see how your progress is coming along is go up to Character. This is what I like to do. Down to Clothing, and then Wind Strength. Go ahead and kick that up to like 0.5. And what it does, it adds our little wind to it, and we can see how it's blowing. So it gives us a nice little preview. If you want to see it even more, you can kick that up to 1 or 2 or whatever you want. Now we can see that this is definitely blowing in the wind, not like heavy leather. So we're going to make those adjustments. We can see here that it's kind of got a springy reaction to it, which is what we don't want. So we're going to make these adjustments and change how this looks. I'm going to just keep the wind the way it is now. Let's go ahead and select our clothing body, and then come down here into the config section, and where it says cloth configuration, here's where we have just a ton of settings that we can use here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this, and you're going to want to open up your PDF file, and we're going to use these settings here. The gravity scale. Now, not all of these will go across here because these were really designed for the Apex file itself when it's being created in another application, but enough of them we will be able to change so we can make it a lot more stiff, get rid of the rubbery, springy nature, and that type of thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the gravity scale right here, see where that is checked off here, and I'm going to bump that up from 1 up to 2, and that's gonna help a lot. Now you can experiment with this. See, when I put it up to 4, put it up to 5, put it up to 10, and it already starts, making the cloth so it doesn't move as much. But for now, we're going to make other settings. We'll keep that at 2. Now we need to look for our friction, which is up here, and we want to change that to 0.73. And then we want to find our bend constraints, and under here we can see that there's a lot more settings here. The stiffness is 1 stiffness multiplier. The stretch, this is where it's giving us that like rubberiness here. So if we change that into a 0, and we can change our stiffness if we want to make it stiffer up to a 2. And our shear resistance, stretch limit, we want to change that from a 1 to a 0. Then we've got damping settings here, which for our heavy leather, is a 0.2 rather than 0.4. Drag, we're showing here 0. And I'm showing a fiber resistance, but we don't have those settings here in UE4. So just go along in here and look at the stiffness and anything that has a stretch limit or anything like that, and lower those down. I'm going to go ahead and take the wind off of this. Bring that up to a stiffness multiplier. You can play around with these settings too. And another way that we can test this if we don't want to use the wind is we can go over to our skeleton itself and click on like the pelvis. Take off my snapping. And we can move it around to see how it's reacting. Now it still needs some more stiffness in here, so I'm going to play around with the settings more over here to see if I can get this to be a little bit stiffer. Stretch limit, I want that a 0. Let's go back over to my skeleton here. Back down to my gravity scale. I'm going to double that up here. Click my save. Yeah, that's making it react stiffer. See how it's a lot stiffer. Much better. I'm liking that a lot better. So these are the settings that you'll use. Again, you've got something to get you most of the way there by using the settings that are recommended here. But you really have a ton of fine-tuning that you can do, and it's a matter of trial and error to get what you like. Now, I wish somebody had come up with just a default setting, like you just had a drop-down menu for burlap, silk, rubber, heavy leather, or whatever. But, you know, they have those in Maya and 3D Max and things like that. But here, it has not been done yet. Hopefully somebody will make that and we'll just be able to drop, you know, just drag and drop or select from a drop-down menu on the different settings. So that is it for this video. In the next video, we're going to continue on with the cloth settings for the cloth strips that are hanging off of the arms and the front long little strips here, and then we'll be getting a different look for to see how the cloth simulation works, you know, in tandem like that.